Bishopstone Yarns, and this is episode 9 of the Bishopstone Yarns podcast. I'd like to say welcome to everyone. If you're a new viewer, welcome. It's really lovely to see you, and I really hope you enjoy spending a little bit of time with me here as I do this podcast. If you're a returning viewer, hi, welcome back. It's lovely to see you again. Well, today's episode is a sit and knit episode. So I've got my spinning wheel here. We'll be doing a little bit of spinning related chit chat and just having a little relaxing time just for ourselves. Now, as I said, I'm Kathy, and this is the Bishopstone Yarns podcast. You can find me on Instagram as Bishopstone Yarns. You can find me on Facebook as Bishopstone Yarns. You can find me on Ravelry as Bishopstone, and I have just started a page on Ravelry for Bishopstone Yarns podcast. So if you're on Ravelry, come on over and join the group of Bishopstone Yarns, and it's places where we can talk about anything or any questions you might have, or any chats you want to have a talk about, anything knitting, spinning, sewing related, or just generally have a little chat about life and crafting at this point in time. So yeah, I'd really love to see you. If you like this video, give it the thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed already, that would be great if you could subscribe, because that helps me out here and helps other people kind of find this podcast as well. So as I was saying, today I am going to be doing some spinning related things. Last time on Sit and Spin, I was spinning up, I had spun up some singles of my silk here, and then last time I was plying it with singles of alpaca. Well, I might have to put down here. And so as you can see, I have finished plying that. I've got a full bobbin here of the plied silk and alpaca, and so now I'm going to wind that off onto my niddy, which is this contraption here, which is beautifully named a niddy. So I guess it's because as you wind off, you use this sort of an action, which is a little bit of a, I guess, a nid and a nod kind of action. And I don't know who invented this, but I actually really love my niddy. I love using it. I just like the action of it. It's a little bit, it's one of those things, isn't it? When you're a crafter and you make things, there are always certain things that, repetitive things, that just the action is just nice and relaxing and soothing. And I think winding off onto a niddy is one of those things. So what I need to do, usually when I wind off onto my niddy, I would be standing up, but I'm not actually able to, well, I can stand up, but I wasn't able to get everything in frame in the camera. So I thought I would try and do this sitting down. We'll see how we go. I might just move the wheel away a bit further. So I have to start off by holding it in the middle, and then it's a little bit like a figure 8 pattern in a way, and you're just going up and down, around. And to make things easier, you kind of knit and you nod as you turn your niddy. Now I guess you can probably see it's going, I've got a full bobbin, so it will take me a little while to wind all of this on. But maybe in the meantime, we can just have a chat. I hope everyone is well. I hope everyone has found some time to relax this week, found a chance to take some time out of their weekly schedules for themselves. I hope everyone has found some time to do a little bit of crafting, a little bit of making, and just have that little bit of time to themselves to enjoy just the craft of making and the craft of whatever craft it is, whether you're a knitter or a crocheter or a spinner or a sewer or whatever it is that you like to do. I hope you've had a chance this week to take some time out. If not, hopefully this is your time to sit down, have a cup of tea, a cup of coffee, and just enjoy your making time, a nice relaxing time for yourself. Well, just thinking about my week, what have I been up to in my week? Seems to have gone very quickly, especially since my last podcast, which was a knitting podcast, which I was talking mainly about my knitting. And I'll have to apologise to those people who've watched it. I probably seemed a little bit distracted. I thought I came across a little bit distracted and a little bit, I think I was umming and ahhing quite a bit. I had received a phone call actually just before I started videoing, and my father had a fall, and he was okay, but he was just being checked out, and at that point in time there wasn't actually anything I could do, so I was just waiting for to hear back, see how he was, see if he was okay, see if he just had bruised himself or whatever. And so yes, I was just a little bit distracted, I think, in that podcast, so I apologise for that. But anyone who's interested, he is okay, he's fine, he didn't break anything, he's just a little bit sore. Luckily he was with my daughter at the time, and so he wasn't by himself, and I hadn't neglected him by not going to be with him. But as things are at the moment with the whole COVID restrictions, even if I'd gone to be, I wasn't able to be with him because while the doctors were checking him out, they don't allow anyone else in there at the same time because of COVID. So yes. Anyway, that was the start of my week. So luckily everything is okay with him. He's fine. I've been down to visit him, and he's fine. He's slowly recovering. Just feeling a bit sore, but he's okay. So moving on from that little bit of excitement, I'm not really quite sure what else has happened. What's happened? Well, the weather has turned. It seems to go between having really lovely, warm weather, which is absolutely lovely, to then quite rainy, and we've had a few days where the wind has been quite cold actually, and so that's why today I am able to wear this sweater, which I've only just recently finished. For those people who also watch the knitting podcast, you would know that this is the Magnolia Bloom that I have finished, and it took a little while for me to get it finished, but that's okay. And now, since the weather today is very overcast and drizzly, I guess is the word, very drizzly. I don't think I mentioned where I was coming to you from. I live in Tasmania, which is the little island off the south of Australia. So we're not, it's not a overly hot climate down here, but I mean, it doesn't get freezing cold either. So we have snow on the mountains in winter, and occasionally, very occasionally, we have snow in the suburbs, but that's very rare. It doesn't happen very often. And yes, so the weather, and I live quite close to the beach, so the surf actually has been very noisy lately. It hasn't necessarily been really large, but especially of an evening when everything else is nice and quiet, you can definitely hear the surf rolling in and crashing at the beach. And the other day when I was down there, walking down there with my dog, there was a lot of seaweed, a lot of the kind of big kelpy seaweed on the beach. So I guess somewhere out to sea it must have been a bit rougher, and the big crashing waves have just brought it all up onto the beach. But the nice thing here is that on the next tide it usually gets washed back out again. So it's not as if the beach ends up littered with lots and lots of kelp and seaweed. And just thinking, what else have I been up to? I've just been doing a little bit of sewing on my quilt that I'm doing, and trying to work out as well what I'm going to do. So I think I mentioned last time that I had more singles of this silk than I did of the alpaca. So I have finished, I guess, about half of the silk on this bobbin, which I applied with the alpaca, and I used up all the alpaca. So I'm wondering what to ply the next lot of my silk with. Originally I thought I would just go and find some more white alpaca and ply it with that, and I do have some more white alpaca, and I had thought about that, but then I had thought I have some kind of a pinky, mauvey, purpley merino wool that I was thinking I might spin that up and then ply it with the rest of the purple, because it would make a really nice gradient change if I was to make this into a shawl and then have one part of the shawl in this kind of purple colourway mixed with the white, and then moving on to the next kind of colourway would be the purple mixed in with the plain colour of the light purple. Hopefully when I finish unwinding this, I'll show you the colour of the merino and see what you think. I think it might be a nice mix. I have been eyeing off the Stephen West, is it Shawlography, the 2021 shawl knit along, and I know a lady who has knitted that, and it is just gorgeous. So I'm thinking very much about buying the pattern for that, and then maybe using some of this wool for that. But then I'd have to have some bright colours as well to use, or whether or not I make a shawl that has kind of just a two-tone shawl that has larger panels with these two contrasting silk and wool kind of blends. So I'm not sure. I might wait till I have spun up the other bobbin and then decide what style I think might suit the colours better. So it's always difficult and kind of seeing fleece and roving when it's in its natural state. Then when you spin it up and you see it on the bobbin, then you put it into a skein, it looks different again. And then when you knit it up, it looks totally different yet again. So it's always interesting to try and find a pattern. Sometimes it can be quite hard, I think, to find a pattern too early on in the spinning process, because until you've actually finished spinning up what you're going to use and you see the finished product and what the yarn looks like, sometimes it can be quite difficult to make a decision. So there's my first skein. I'll see if I can come up and show it to you a bit closer up. So for the moment, I'm going to leave this one on the niddy noddy until I'll then tie it off. I'll put some little ties around each little section here, and then I will take it off and soak it. I'll just pop it in some nice warm water and then leave it there for, I don't know, at least half an hour, and then dry it off, and then let it, once it's dry, I'll have a good idea of how the weight of the yarn and what I might decide to do with it. So yes, there's the skein. Now if I turn my wheel back around towards me, oh, I need a bit closer. Now the colour that I was thinking about using is, I don't know how easy it is you don't see that colour, is here, and it's merino, and I've got 100 grams of it, and this colour is lavender. So I don't know, it's showing up a lot bluer. It's actually a much pinker, dropped a bit. It's actually a lot pinker than it looks there on the camera. But I thought it kind of picks up some of the pinks that are in here. I thought it might be quite a nice sort of colorway. Yeah. So I thought that's what I might start spinning on now. And I guess once I spin the singles up, if I don't like the look of it, I don't have to apply it with the silk at all. But I think it'll look pretty nice. And that's a great thing about everything that we do as makers is we can change our minds as we go, where there's no hard and fast rules about what we're doing. I mean, of course there are some technical things, there are some things that we have to follow, things like patterns and things like that, but to suit ourselves, and if there's something that we want to change or we want to make a little bit different, we're allowed to do that. We can do that. And I always find it really interesting actually looking and listening at what other people have made and how other people have adapted patterns, especially knitting patterns. There are a lot of people who adapt knitting patterns, of course, to fit their own body type, and to see sewing patterns, which I have never really been able to adapt a sewing pattern. I have made, when I was younger, I have made a few things without a pattern, but I haven't actually taken a pattern and then changed it. And with spinning, I think once we know the beginning rules, the technical side to why something works or how something works, once we know those basics, then we can just modify and change it to what suits us. Because like with everything, I mean, the spinning that we do, we're spinning it because we want to come out with a certain yarn in the end. And the yarn that we want is the yarn that we like. And so it may not be the type of yarn that the person next to you who's spinning likes or indeed spins, but that's okay because it's your yarn and it's the yarn that you want to use for your project, or, like I said before, or just to have as a really nice, lovely decoration to look at. So I think as crafters we're really lucky that way, that we can learn the skills, learn the basics, learn the techniques, and then we can go ahead and change things to suit ourselves. Mind you, sometimes they don't always work, but that's all part of the learning. Sometimes we want to make something, and I know there have been times when I've had in my mind something that I want to make and the look I would like at the end, and I've gone ahead and made it, and it has not turned out the way that I wanted. Not saying that there was anything wrong with it, or that it wasn't a usable yarn, or that the colour, there was anything wrong with the colour. It's just that it wasn't what I was wanting to make at that particular time. But that's how we learn, isn't it? We kind of have a go, have a play, and through our playing we can learn what we can do, what we can achieve, and enjoy it. And that's why it's good to have, I think, a whole variety of fleeces and tops and rovings and fleeces, because you want to have some that are not so precious, that are not so expensive, some that are just, that you can use just to practice on, just to play around with, and not be worried about if you make a mistake, you've just spent your really expensive, favourite fleece or rovings, and then you won't be able to, you'll be really sad because you've spent all that money and not got what you've wanted it to at the end. So I think it's always good to have some things, I shouldn't always say cheaper, but just not as precious fleeces and tops that you can use just to practice around with. And same with dyeing. I mean, when you come to dyeing, sometimes it can be a bit of a trial and error, especially if you're after a certain colour, a particular colour that you want to really kind of mix in or match with something else. It's always nice to have something to have a bit of a play on with first, to make sure that the colour that you're going to end up with is the colour you want. Or even actually the colours that you mix together. Sometimes they might seem like great colours in your head, and then when you dye up the yarn, you'll look and see and realise that the colours didn't quite match as well as you were hoping they were going to. Yes, so I think we should all kind of spend a little bit more time enjoying the playing aspect and the enjoyment, remembering to enjoy what we're doing, especially with spinning, because it is, apart from when you're first starting, it can be quite frustrating, like learning any new skill. It can be difficult and frustrating and annoying and yes. But we do it because we love it and because we enjoy it, and so we should remember always too that we're doing it to enjoy it. So I guess if something is frustrating us, if you're spinning and you're finding it incredibly frustrating or something's not working, sometimes we just need to get up and walk away from the wheel, go and have a cup of tea, go and have a relax somewhere else, or just do something else and then maybe come back to it later on in the day or the next day. And then sometimes we'll find, it all works and it's much easier because we're not getting as uptight. And spinning is one of those things, I think it's very hard to enjoy and to do well when you're really uptight and anxious. I mean, you can't grip onto the yarn really tightly. You have to hold the tops of the fleece. You have to hold it lightly. You have to be very gentle with what you're doing. And I think in that way, that's why one of the reasons why it can be such a relaxing and calming thing to do, because we have to remind ourselves sometimes that we need to take a big breath, we need to relax, we need to hold everything nice and lightly, we need to be calm, and then we can start spinning and enjoy it. And it is one of those things, I think, that even if you are a bit tense or a bit concerned at a time, and then you start spinning, it does relax you because you have to kind of relax. You have to just sit there, treadle. If you've got a spinning wheel that isn't electric, but even with an electric wheel, you still have to hold your wool lightly, have a nice light touch, and be relaxed in what you're doing. And that also involves kind of finding a nice comfortable chair and one that works well for you. I mean, the chair I'm sitting in is actually an outdoor, just a plastic outdoor chair, but it's the right height for me. It works quite well and it doesn't squeak. I do have a really lovely cane chair that I like to sit in to spin in, but it does make a lot of noise, and I don't think it would have been very good for the podcast because every time I moved it would be squeaking, and I think that would be quite distracting for the podcast actually. So yes, so it is the trusty old outdoor chair here, but because it's the right height for me, and I can even be lazy and leave my arm here on there, lean it and really relax and put my elbows up here. Probably not something I would suggest for someone who is learning to spin, to leave your arm on the chair, but well, I've been spinning for a while, so it's kind of comfortable for me at the moment. So, yes. So, apart from us all taking some time out to have our nice relaxing us time, our own making time, and remembering to relax while we spin. So I think that's a really big part of spinning and learning to spin and continuing to spin, is remembering that it's something we're doing because we enjoy it and it's relaxing, and we need to think about having a nice relaxing time while we're doing it. And I'm really interested to hear what everyone else is spinning at the moment, or even not just what they're spinning, but what other people are making at the moment. And especially if there's anyone out there at the moment who is knitting with their hand spun, I would love to hear what you're making. And because I always find it so exciting to see what people make out of their hand spun, because hand spun is so unique and it's so individual, and so the items that people make are always exactly that, unique and individual. And so it's always fascinating and interesting to see what other people are making, and their colour choices, their pattern choices, and also how they've changed things to suit them. And in a lot of ways, I think it's a little bit like an extension of our personalities in some ways, because we gravitate with spinning usually towards colours, our favourite colours, and we gravitate towards kind of making things that are very much us, things that we're going to enjoy making and enjoy wearing. And so it's always, so much fun to see what everyone else is making and what they've decided to make out of their hand spun. I know as a new spinner, I used to find it really difficult to use my hand spun, which is kind of a little strange when you think about it in a way, because you spend all this time and at the beginning it does take a lot longer. To make a skein takes longer than once you've been spinning for a while. So it's like any skill, you get quicker at it. But when I was learning to spin, you are so excited and so happy that you've created a skein, that you've done this fantastic spinning, and then I found it very hard to then use my first lot of hand spun, because it was so precious, because it meant such a lot to me, and I felt like I had worked really hard to make it. And I guess there was also a feeling of, but it's not as good as a commercial yarn, or it's not as good as someone else's hand spinning, or it isn't good enough to use. And I think all those things combined together stopped me from making something with my hand spun. And then I do remember the first thing I made, I think, well, it's really hard to remember actually, but I think it was one of the first things I made with my hand spun. It was an orange vest, and I think it had cables on it, and it was quite a nice vest. But I don't think I'd ever blocked it. I don't ever think I felt that it was worthy of being blocked. Not that I didn't like it or wasn't happy with it, but I just felt it wasn't as good as if I'd used a commercial yarn, or if I'd used someone else's hand spun, which would have been so much better than mine, because it wouldn't have been thick and thin and lumpy and have all that character of of a beginner spinner's yarn. And looking back now, I mean, I can totally understand why I felt that way. But at the same time, I wish that I had embraced my earlier hand spinning a bit more and really just used it and enjoyed it, because that was what I was spinning for. That was what I was wanting to do, was to make yarn and make yarn that I could use and not have that feeling that, oh, it's not good enough and what could I possibly make out of it that would be okay. And I think sometimes a lot of people feel a little bit like that about their hand spun, and I think it's a shame because even some of the most thick and thin, bubbly beginner yarn that might be overspun, underspun, you can always find something. There can always be a project that you can find that you can make things like hats and mittens and scarves and cowls and even shawls. All lend themselves to a hand-spun yarn that may not be as perfect as we want it to be, that may not be as consistent, but in some of those patterns you can hide some of those inconsistencies in a way, while at the same time celebrating the fact that this is something that we have made and that something that we can use. And especially for weavers as well, there's a lot you can do with beginner hand-spun yarn if you're a weaver. There's a lot of uses for hand-spun yarn in weaving, and of course there are some things you can't use, wouldn't be appropriate for, but there are so many things that we can do with our hand-spun to celebrate it and enjoy it and rejoice in the fact that this is something we've made. This is something we have taken from its rawest form. We have made the yarn. We have created a unique hand-spun yarn, and then we have turned it into something ourselves. And I think that's something that we should celebrate and should be really, really proud of. And I know it took me a little while to get to that point. Not to say that there aren't yarns that I make now that I still look at. There are some that I look at and I kind of am disappointed in. It's not what I wanted. It's not how I had thought it would turn out. But on the same side, it's still my yarn, and there's always something I can find to make from that yarn. And which is probably why I've got such a big, huge, long queue of things to make, because I have a lot of yarn and I have a really long queue, and maybe I just need to get knitting a bit quicker. But then of course I get a bit distracted with spinning, with other knitting projects, with sewing projects. Oh, I haven't even done any weaving for quite a long time, so that's another area that I get distracted in. And oh, that doesn't even mention all the other things that we have to do in our life, like weeding in the garden and pruning, which is kind of a little bit of pruning going on at the moment because we're in autumn, and sweeping up of leaves and making of mulch and compost at the moment. I must admit I do love this time of the year, and I do love, I love my garden and I love gardening, and it's exciting because we have a new garden in terms of new house, newish house, and a garden that was here, so totally different type of garden to our previous house. And so, but I love mulch, I love compost, and I love that whole creating soil for the garden and trying to improve the soil in the garden. And so this time of the year in autumn, it's great because there's so many things from all the different types of pruning that happens in the garden, to the leaves, to even just cutting the lawn. You end up with so many great things to put into the compost and to put back onto the garden beds for mulch. So yes, that's another lot of jobs that need to be done as well. It's a good thing I enjoy doing all these things. I mean, I do think sometimes I should have only kind of had one or two hobbies, maybe one or two areas of crafting. But then I thought, then you miss out on the enjoyment of so many different areas of making. And it's not like I've got a deadline. It's not like I have to finish all these things by a certain date or a time. It's not as if anything bad's going to happen if I don't finish, what I'm spinning by a certain date. So I think I'd rather just enjoy the process of making and enjoy the whole process involved with making and creating, rather than worrying about how quickly I can get through my list of things that I'd like to make. I think I'd only start worrying if I got down to nothing on my list. I don't think that's ever going to happen. I can't imagine that ever happening. That would be a pretty scary point to be at, I think, if I had a list with nothing on it. But yeah, I think we're probably all in that same boat, aren't we? Probably never ever going to get to a point where we have nothing on a list that we want to make, which is a good thing. And then sometimes I think I need to stop adding to my list of things, but then I always find more patterns and more things, and yes. I have noticed, there have been quite a few podcasters who've been doing make a little bingo card where they will list 12 or so things that they want to make in a year, and then mark those things off like a bingo card. Or people are doing, is it Make 9? Where they've got 9 items that they want to try and get through and finish in the year. And I was thinking about that the other day, and I got to 9 quite quickly, quite easily. And I was just thinking, when I was looking back at it, I didn't have any spinning related things on my little list. Because really I should have some spinning ideas or spinning projects on my Make 9 list as well. Unless, of course, I pop them in with a project. So if there was a shawl I wanted to make, then I could also have spinning the yarn for the shawl as part of the Make 9. I don't know. Yes. I'm really tempted to make a little list and actually put it out publicly. But then I feel if I put it out, but there are so many. I mean, how do I choose? How do I really choose which 9 things I'm really going to make, and which ones do I leave off? Which are the most important? I don't know. I'm not sure. And yes. Oh well. I'll have to think about it a bit more. Maybe I'll talk about it a bit more on my next podcast. And considering that kind of talking more about knitting in that one. But yes, thinking about spinning projects, I guess apart from this one, I haven't actually really looked too much further forward as to what I am going to be spinning next, what my next spinning project is going to be. I think I've got a little bit of time here between spinning up this single and plying it and finishing off what I'm doing here to work out what it is that I might choose to do for my next spinning project. The other thing I could do is, I suppose, is go through my spinning stash and have a look at, I've got a lot of fibres, I've got a lot of mixes as well, like things like bits of Angelina and silk and different types of fibres, which I really need to put together and make some bats for spinning up. So maybe that should be a project. My next project is getting everything kind of ready into a spinnable form, instead of having it just sitting in a box somewhere. But yeah, maybe you could let me know, what do you think? Do you think I should go through my stash and find out what I've got and then create some spinning bats? I've got a drum carder, so I could just use my drum carder to make those. I had thought about, I have thought quite a bit about buying a blending board to make roll eggs and colourful kind of rovings for spinning. But at the same time, I then had thought, well, I've got a drum carder, and I know it's not the same, but it is quite similar. I don't know, for the price of a blending board, because they're really not cheap, but for the price of a blending board, I don't know that for me, for what I would like to do, I couldn't just create on my drum carder and use it that way. Yes. Oh, see, talking to you has made me start thinking about these bats and going through my stash of fleece and tops and all the other little bits and pieces that I can put into my bats. There was a time when I was doing quite a bit of spinning using Angelina, which is like a little short, sparkly man-made fibre that you can add into your wool or whatever fibre tops, and gives it a really nice sparkle. There was a time when I had used quite a bit of that with, I was doing some weaving and I wanted some really nice sparkly yarns for the weaving. So I've still got a lot of that, and I'm actually not even sure what some of the other bits and pieces are that I have, but maybe that's what I should do. I should go through the stash, have a look at it all, and see what I can make with it. Be interested, I would really love to hear what other people have. What little bits and pieces do you have that you like to add into your spinning and into your rovings or your fleece, to add a little bit of something special to it? I know people add all sorts of things, from beads and little bits of material to bits of yarn. You've got silks and all sorts. I have spun all sorts in the past. I have even spun natural kind of bits of straw and twigs and things like that into some yarn for an art piece that I was making. I don't know that I would try that again. It was quite, it wasn't difficult, it was just very hard on the hands. Some things are much easier to spin, of course, because they're nice and soft, like this merino and the alpacas and things like that. Then when you start adding some other, usually the man-made fibres, but in this case, like twigs and bits of straw and stuff, and it wasn't a pleasant spin, but I was spinning it for a reason. I was spinning it for an art project, so yes. And the other problem with it was, I had kept it for quite a long time after I'd used it, but over time, of course, those things do start to break down, and in the end I had to put the whole piece out because it was really literally disintegrating before my eyes. And every time it moved and you moved it, bits would be falling off, and yes. So it was fun while I did it and used it, but I think I've moved on from that. And yes. Actually, that's something that would be quite interesting, wouldn't it? We could have an episode on and have a little talk about all the unusual things that we have spun, and also maybe some of the things that people would like to try to spin, because I have spun a whole range of things, and there was a time when I thought, if it looks like I could use it, I'll give it a go, and I did. And some of them I like, the twigs and straw and stuff, I wouldn't go back and do again. Some of them were quite good fun, and but others weren't quite so successful. Yeah. So yeah, no, it'd be interesting. Maybe we should have an episode, I think, on, let me know what you think. If you'd like to have an episode on where we can talk about all the strange and wonderful things we have spun or wanted to spin. I think that could be quite good fun and quite interesting. And remembering now that I've started the Ravelry group for Bishopstone Yarns podcast. So anyone who's there on Ravelry is free and happy. I'm really happy for people to come along and put some comments in and start the discussion going. I've only simply just started it, so of course it is lovely to have some discussions up and running, and it's always fun talking about crafts and what we're doing and looking at what other people are doing as well. And you can always tell your friends about it. People don't have to watch the podcast to come along and have a discussion in the group about spinning or knitting or sewing or whatever else that they are doing. It's just a lovely place, hopefully a lovely, nice, relaxing and caring space where people can enjoy talking about their crafting and their life and what they're doing. And yeah, I think hopefully that'll be a nice space to talk about all things crafting. Well, it looks a little bit like the sunshine is going to come out. I don't know if you heard or not, there have been a few little creeps around where the sun is starting to warm up the house a little bit. I think it has stopped raining outside. I think the weather, actually, I don't know what the weather's doing. It's very difficult to tell. It's always good to get a bit of rain down here, because as I was saying before, it's quite dry where we are, and the soil is very sandy because we're very close to the beach, and so rain is always nice. It's always nice to get some rain for the garden. And yeah, I guess I should probably stop chatting now, and we can pick this up in a couple of weeks. Hopefully people will leave a comment. Let me know what you're thinking about, what things you'd like, if there's anything in particular you'd like to talk about, or things that we can work on together. And don't forget that if you like this podcast, give it a thumbs up. and if you're not subscribed, then subscribe, and yes, tell your friends about it. And hopefully you've had a really nice, relaxing time here spinning with me. I know I've really enjoyed it. I have been really needing to sit down and do a bit of spinning